today I'm not giving you World Religions 101 as a lecture. We don't have time for that anyways. But all of you have Google, and that information is available in 100 different places. What is less available, and what I want to spend our time talking about, is how we can make comparisons between different things. And so, I want to begin with a short conversation. I have in my two hands two different things, a golf ball in my right hand and a grapefruit in my left hand. And I would love to hear a few of you make a comparison between these two things.
Big and small.
I heard big and small. Both are round. White and orange.
I've never eaten a golf ball.
One is edible and one is not. What was that back there?
Man-made and natural.
Man-made and natural.
One
Okay.
is perfectly spherical, the other is a spheroid.
One is perfectly spherical and one is more natural in shape. A reference back to our reading, perhaps. Perfect. Thank you. If you're also on Zoom, you can type in your observations about the comparison between a grapefruit and a golf ball. So, surely you have more ideas. I can imagine a tidal wave would have come if you had not been so polite in your discernment. Here are some of the things that I noticed. A minority of people enjoy each of these things, even here in the United States. This made me wonder, how much of an overlap would there be in the Venn diagram of people who like grapefruits and people who like golf? I noticed that one of these has a fragrance, the grapefruit. The golf ball does not. Both have surfaces that are covered with dimples that you can see and feel. In this simple comparison, we can learn a lot about the process of comparing different things and how we encounter difference in our lives. One of the first things that came to my mind was that the golf ball and the grapefruit have a similar construction. If you look at the cross-section of the outer layer of either of these, the outer layer is relatively thin and the inner core makes up most of its size. You probably know that from grapefruits. A golf ball is similar, actually. You see, golf was a very big sport in my family growing up. On several occasions, I watched my very curious older brother cut into a golf ball with a sharp knife. And given the choice between a golf ball or a grapefruit, I would choose the grapefruit any day. Part of the familiar connection to golf is, for me, having been enrolled in lessons in a sport that I had no desire to play in the heat of Oklahoma summers. Why all this personal background? Because our familiarity can be helpful in noticing points of comparison. And when we enter comparisons, we bring a bias with us. That bias could be being more familiar and more comfortable with one of the things, and one of them seeming different. A bias could come from a positive or negative experience from the past. It could come from societal norms or stereotypes. Even when we try to avoid it, we bring a bias into our observation and comparison. It's a very human thing to do. But to have any chance of reducing bias, we have to first recognize that it exists. I am biased against golf. I want to offer another comparison between the golf ball and the grapefruit. Now listen closely to this. Both the golf ball and the grapefruit originate from human interaction with trees. And the sport of golf is older than grapefruits. Golf originated in Scotland in the 15th century. Grapefruits happened 200 years later in 17th century Barbados. Yes, golf is older than grapefruits, and both come from human manipulation of trees. The first golf balls were carved out of wood. And grapefruit is a combination of sweet orange and pomelo fruit, both of which originate in Asia, but accidentally cross-pollinated in an orchard in Barbados. Thank you for going down that little rabbit trail. But you see, in the process of comparing two things, we are drawn into learning much more about each of them. As we make an observation about one thing, we naturally wonder if it is similar or different in that other thing. Or we might put them on a scale. Which one is older? Which one weighs more? How many people participate in each of them? And so on. Having two things to observe rather than just one opens a world of possibilities for deeper exploration. There's one scale of comparison that's particularly unhelpful. That is the question, which one is better? Is a golf ball inherently better than a grapefruit? It's a nonsensical question. One provides nutrients, the other bounces particularly well off of hard surfaces. One is not inherently better, they are different. And we know that in the abstract. We know that which is the better religion is a nonsense question. We know that which is the better culture or what is the best gender is an absurd question. But when we get down to the very basic comparison of a golf ball and a grapefruit, hopefully we can more directly see how ridiculous that idea of better really is. We often get pulled into the conversation of which is better when we mistakenly think that two different things exist for the same purpose. Typically, that looks like comparing something new or different to something that we're already very familiar with, and assuming that the different new thing is an attempt to be like the thing that we know. But jazz is not attempting to be classical music. Mushu pork is not attempting to be a taco, even though they are both handheld chopped meats served in thin, flat, round breads. There are similarities. These things live in a similar category, but evaluating one by its ability to adhere to the norms of what we are familiar with is a very poor exercise. Whether it's golf balls or grapefruits, tacos or mushu pork, jazz or classical music, to evaluate any of these as good or bad, we have to first become familiar with the very particular genre of what is that thing trying to be on its own. We'll be discussing quite a bit more of that in our world religions class, the neighboring faiths class that our adult religious education class is doing. In this book, God is Not One by Stephen Prothero, he suggests that at the core of each of these different religions, they're trying to answer a fundamentally different question, a question that arises out of that particular culture and time. So comparing them to what's familiar, for most of us, that's Christianity, comparing them to a Christian tradition just doesn't make sense. In addition to acknowledging real difference, he also acknowledges that there is a shadow side of these religious traditions. Some aspects of every religious tradition are really problematic, and he's honest about that in a way that a lot of progressive people don't have the guts to do. It's often misstated that Unitarian Universalists can believe anything they want. As Unitarian Universalists, you can believe a huge spectrum of different things, but there are sort of two basic criteria, I think. One, it has to make sense to you somewhat, and it has to make a difference. It has to make you a better person, like more compassionate and more open. That's for us. I would say for other traditions, we hold out one criteria for belief. It's only that it has to make you a better person. Every single faith tradition, including our own, has a capacity to build up walls or to tear them down. Not all beliefs are equal. As people of faith, we are called to the difficult task of examining our own beliefs. Which ones make us more loving and which ones separate us? We're called to the difficult task of examining our own beliefs, and we're called to engage compassionately with other belief systems and to learn from others in the process. Amen.